If you want to learn how to model in Blender but felt lost when you first opened it, this video is for you. We'll create this model from scratch while covering the fundamental concepts and tools. We'll see how to navigate in the interface, create and transform objects, and start modeling with confidence. The goal is to help you feel comfortable using the program. So, download the latest version from the official Blender website, which is completely free, and let's get started. Okay guys, the first time we open Blender, this panel will appear, asking us for some basic preferences. I recommend leaving everything as default. I recommend keeping the language in English, even if it's not your main language, since most guides and terms are in English. And personally, I like to select with right-click. I think this way modeling is faster, and just like that, I click Save Preferences. Before modeling, there are a couple of things we need to understand so Blender stops being so confusing. First, our interface is divided into several panels. In the main panel, we have the 3D view, where all our 3D objects are. In this panel here, we have the outliner, where all the objects in the scene are. In this panel on the right, we have the properties, where all the characteristics of all the elements in Blender are. And finally, down here, we have the timeline. So, the first thing we'll look at is how to navigate the interface. In Blender, we can navigate in three ways. We can orbit, we can do panning to look from side to side, and we can zoom. To orbit, simply use the middle click and drag the mouse. To pan, press Shift and middle click, and we can move within the same view. And to zoom, simply use the mouse wheel or press Ctrl and middle click. If you can do all of this without losing sight of the cube, then we're already taking our first steps. It might take you a little while to get used to these commands, but over time they become very intuitive. Additionally, I'll also leave you a link where you can find all the shortcuts in PDF format or as separate images. Well, the next thing we'll look at are the transformations we can do in Blender. There are three types of transformations: move, rotate, and scale. To move an object, we can press the G key and move it in the 3D view. To rotate it, we press the R key and rotate it from our current view. And with the S key, we scale the object. We can also activate these tools here to move it directly with the arrows. Using the arrows, we can move it along any of the axes. Normally, I recommend leaving it on the Move tool, but the easiest way is with keyboard shortcuts. Now, to have control over these transformations, I can press the tool, in this case the G key to move, and with X, Y, and Z, I determine along which axis it will move. If I press the X axis, it moves along the X axis, Y axis, and Z axis. And this works the same with the other transformations. If I press R and Z, it rotates on the Z axis, R and Y, and R and X. And for scaling, it's the same. If I press S and Z, it scales on the Z axis, Y axis, and X axis. And finally, we can do the same thing, but by locking one of those axes. For example, I'm going to lock the Z axis. I press G and then Shift Z. And this way, I can move it on all axes except the Z axis. And I can do the same with scale. I press S and Shift Z to lock the Z axis, lock the Y axis, and lock the X axis. And with that, we now have the basic transformation concepts. We'll apply all of this in a moment when we start modeling the little house. There are other shortcuts we can use to visualize specific views, and those keys are the numbers on the numpad. However, I have a compact keyboard, and many of you might have one too. So what I do is go to Preferences, and here in Input I enable this option, which is Emulate Numpad. When I activate it, I'll be able to access those views with the numbers on the left side of the keyboard. So if I press 1, I go to the front view. If I press 3, I go to the right side view. If I press 7, I go to the top view. We can read this up here on the top left. It says Top View and in orthographic mode. For the back view, we press Ctrl 1. Control 3 for the left view, and Control 7 for the bottom view. This way, we can quickly access those viewpoints. And finally, with the 5 key, we toggle perspective mode. All of this might seem like a lot right now, but in a moment, we're going to use it to build our model. Now, to select objects, we have multiple ways. First, using the click we assigned when it asked us. Here, I'm using right-click, but if you used left-click, use that one. If we want to select multiple objects, we simply drag with the click. And if we want to select all objects, we press the A key. To deselect them, we press the A key again, but in this case, it didn't let me, since by default, Blender requires double tapping A. Personally, I find that very uncomfortable, so here's another recommendation in Preferences. In the Key Map section, we enable Select All toggles. Then, simply with the A key, we select or deselect everything, and this is much faster. Now let's see how we can edit objects. Blender uses several different modes to edit objects. We can find the modes up here. In this case, we are in object mode, but there are multiple other modes. This time, we're only going to explore edit mode. To enter edit mode, we can select it from here, or we can simply press the Tab key. With Tab, we enter this mode, where we can now see each vertex, each face, and each edge of our model individually. We can also decide which type of selection we want. There, we have vertex, edge, or face selection. For now, we'll leave it on vertices. And here in Edit mode, we can use the same transformation tools we saw earlier, which are Move with the G key. We can also lock axes, rotate with the R key, and scale with the S key. Likewise, we can lock the axes. And finally, before starting with the practical phase, let's see how we can add new objects. If I press Shift-A, this panel will open where I have a wide variety of objects I can add. In our case, we're only interested in meshes. So here I can create, for example, a new cube. I can create circles, spheres, cylinders, and many other options. New objects will always be created at the 3D cursor, and the 3D cursor is this target icon we have here. We can place that target by clicking anywhere in the 3D interface. So wherever I place it, if I press Shift-A and create a new object, it will be created in that position. If I click over here and create a new object, it will be created where the 3D cursor is. We can position it with a click, or with the shortcut Shift-S, I can place it at the world center again, so it stays in the center of everything, or I can place it at the center of the selected object. And if I want to delete an object, I simply press the X key, and it asks for confirmation to delete it. Or press the Delete key to remove it without asking anything. And that's it. Now we have everything we need to start creating in Blender, and now let's continue with the fun part, which will be starting to build our first model. First of all, I want us to analyze a bit the model we are going to create. This model is made with very basic objects. If we review it, you can see that they are cubes, cylinders, more cylinders, cones, and shapes with very simple geometries. If I check here, for example, it is basically a cube to which we added some geometry and deformed it a bit. So to make this model, we will only use 2 extra tools. We are going to use Loop Cut and the Extrusion. We will look at them in detail in just a moment. So what I'm going to do is take a screenshot of this image, and I'm going to use a program for reference management, which is called PureRef. You can download it. It is completely free. So here, I'm going to paste that image and adjust the window. Just like this. I go back to my new Blender file and I'm going to place it around here. And PureRef has a very interesting feature, which is that I can place this image on top of any other program. If I right-click and go to Mode, I can select this option that says Always on Top of, and I click on the Blender window. That way, we will always be able to see it here as a reference. So I highly recommend that you use references all the time when you are learning. References are fundamental. I'm going to leave this here to guide myself with the things we are going to do. First of all, I'm going to place the cursor at the center of the world with Shift-S, and we are going to start with the structure of this little house. I'm going to press 1 to go to the front view. I'm going to enter Object Mode with the Tab key. I'm going to position this cube on the surface so that it sits on the x-axis, and that is to start positioning our objects properly from the beginning. And I'm going to enter Edit Mode with the Tab key. And here I'm going to press Ctrl R, and this creates a new loop. This is the first tool we are going to see, to create new loops. And here I can select these two vertices with Shift, use the Move gizmo, and move them a bit upward on the Z-axis. We can do it using the arrows, or by pressing G and Z. We already have this, but we can see here in the reference that it has a slight curve. So we are going to need to add a bit more geometry here. So what we will do is press Ctrl R on this side and confirm, and press Ctrl R on the other side. And now we have a bit more resolution. So I'm going to switch here to Edge Select mode. I select this edge, and with Shift I select this other one, and move it on the Z-axis using the arrows. I can also scale it on the X-axis by pressing S and X. And we scale it a bit. You can see we're already getting a similar silhouette. In our reference, this little house is a bit irregular. It is narrow at the bottom, but it becomes wider toward the top. So what I will do is also select all of this and scale it on the X-axis. This makes it look a bit more interesting, so it is not so regular. So there we have the base of our little house. Something I also recommend to better visualize our models is to go here to the Viewport Shading options and enable Cavity. What Cavity does is highlight both edges and cavities, and that helps us read the geometry much better. We already made this base of the house, and now we are going to create the bottom surface. For that, I press Shift-A and create a cube. And in Edit mode, I scale it a bit, and then scale it on the Z-axis, only by pressing S and Z. We scale it so that the edges are closer together, something like this. And the bottom part, I'm also going to scale a bit more. I switch to Face Selection, select the bottom face, and scale it slightly. Now, we have another new object, which is simply a deformed cube. Let's move on to the next one, which is this step. It is another small cube that I'm going to move to the front and scale on the Z-axis. Notice that with this handful of tools, we already have many options to start creating objects. Alright, so I place it around here and scale it a bit more on the X-axis and move it slightly inward. For now, let's do it like this. Don't worry if it looks a bit different, because in the end, you can make the necessary adjustments. Now that we have the parts of the house, we are going to add the base, which is simply a cylinder. So I press Shift-A, add the cylinder, scale it, and then scale it on the Z-axis so it gets flattened, and move it further down, up to this point. Alright. And here we can see a first difference with the reference. As you can see, these edges are visible, but in the reference they are smooth. And that is because I have smoothed the normals here. Normals are the direction in which polygons are rendered. So what I'm going to do to make them look smooth is press the W key and select Shade Auto Smooth. And when I do that, on the right side, this modifier appears, which is smoothing all angles that are less than 30 degrees. In this case, all these vertical edges here are less than 30 degrees, so they will be smoothed, while this one here on the border has 90, so it will remain sharp. I'm going to lift this a bit more so it sits again on the surface, and we continue. For the columns of this little house, we are going to follow the same process, which is simply creating cubes. I'm going to scale them, move it here so I can see it well, and in edit mode, I scale it on the Z-axis and then make it a bit smaller. And I'm going to try to place it in this same corner area of my house. I'm going to put it here, move it a bit more so it is properly aligned. And for the top part, I'm going to select vertices again and lower it to place it correctly in the corner. If it feels a bit irregular, don't worry. That is completely normal. We will take the time to adjust it. For example, I think I can make it thinner. I'm going to select everything with A and press Alt-S. What Alt-S does is scale the model along the normal's direction, meaning it makes it thinner or thicker. Once again, I adjust it to the corner and it looks like this. Okay, perfect. We already made the first pillar and I want to create the others, but it is not worth modeling them from scratch. So for that, we are going to use a modifier. To create a modifier, we go here and press Shift-A and search for the mirror modifier. I type mirror and select it. And what this does is duplicate the object and mirror it using an origin point. In this case, it appears here, but I want the origin point to be this little house so it is centered. So I select the column, and with the modifier eyedropper, I select the base of this house. And now it is mirrored correctly. Perfect. It is currently doing it on the x-axis. However, I also want it on the y-axis, so we also get the ones in the back. So we enable the y-axis, and now we have the 4 pillars. If yours ends up misaligned, meaning it appears in a different position and not perfectly aligned, what you can do is select this object and press Ctrl-A and apply all transformations. Because it is possible that you moved this object in edit mode. I'm going to show you as an example. I select it, move it over here, then go back to object mode, and if I move it again, you can see that the origin point becomes misaligned. So to fix it, we press Ctrl-A and apply all transformations. And done. I think we can refine the model a bit here. I'm going to select all these edges at the front and move them slightly backward so the columns stand out more. Likewise, in the back, I move it inward. And I'm also going to select everything and scale it slightly on the x-axis. Now let's continue with the roof. For the roof, we're also going to use some new tools. First of all, I'm going to place the 3D cursor around here. I'm going to press Shift-A and create a plane. The plane appears here in this area. I'm going to rotate it and position it so that it's more or less aligned with the vertices of the house. According to the reference, it would be around here. I want to adjust it properly so it reaches the tip, so I'm going to go into edit mode. But if I select this vertex here and move it, you can see that the back vertex is not selected. So for that, we're going to use X-ray view so we can visualize it properly. If I press Alt-Z, I enter X-ray view, and this way, when I make a selection, it selects both what's in the front and what's in the back. And now I can position it correctly. Alright, now we're going to use the loop cut tool again. I'm going to press Ctrl-R, but here I'm going to use the mouse wheel to add more cuts. I'll add a few. 6 should be enough in this case. And now we're going to create this small curve. To make that curve, we'll do the following. We select the middle edge and move it inward. But when we do this, we're going to use another tool called proportional editing. I'm going to activate it, and now when I move the vertices, you can see that it also moves the nearby ones. And that will help us make it more even. However, the curve here is too sharp. So I'm going to come here to the options, and in this case, the one we need is sphere. I select it, and when we move it, as you can see, the shape becomes more rounded. That's the one I need in this case. To adjust the size, we use the mouse wheel, and I make sure it stays nicely close to the surface below. And that's it. I exit X-ray view, and that's what we have. Now I'm going to add the mirror modifier, and both parts of the roof appear on this side. So with the eyedropper, we select the house, and we're going to add another modifier. In Blender, I can stack multiple modifiers on top of each other. In this case, I press Shift-A and create the Solidify modifier. What this does is add volume to the faces of the selected objects. So as you can see, we're adding volume. In this case, here at the top, I'm getting a gap, and that's because these vertices here are not connected. If I disable the solidifier and zoom in, you can see the vertices don't connect. Let's connect them. I go into edit mode, select these two vertices, and if I move them along the x-axis, they still separate. To prevent that, activate mirror and enable clipping, and move them slightly outward. I reduce the proportional editing radius so it doesn't interfere and make sure they're properly aligned. Then, when I activate Solidify, it looks like this. It's still a bit uneven, but to fix that, we enable even thickness. Alright, now everything looks much more uniform. I'll keep adjusting the Solidify a bit, and I'll also tweak the offset so it intersects nicely with the model below. So, this is the result we're getting. I'm going to make a small adjustment to the roof. I'll scale it slightly on the y-axis. There we go. And I'll also select it and press W, Shade Auto Smooth, so the surface becomes smoother. So you see guys, with just a few tools, we already have all this progress. Now let's make the window doors using the tools we've already seen. First, I place the 3D cursor here, create a cube, scale it. In X-ray view, I select this and stretch it. And I keep scaling and positioning it where I want. I want the door to look a bit irregular. Notice how the objects are slightly tilted, and that is to make the object more interesting and stylized, because if everything is perfectly straight, it becomes a bit boring. To avoid building the other side of the door frame from scratch, I press Shift-D to duplicate it. Then press X to move it along the X-axis. I go in here and adjust this position as well. Now for the top part, I press Shift-D, rotate it, and place it in the correct position, pushing it slightly forward. I'll also make it a bit more irregular. I move it like this so it becomes thicker on one side, and I disable proportional editing because we don't need it. I finish these small adjustments to the plank. I want it to be tilted like this. This one too. And perfect. Now we have this. We can bring these two parts of the door forward, and for the window, we can simply select the whole door, press Shift-D to duplicate it, then R and Z and type 90 to rotate it 90 degrees. And now we can place it on the side wall, trying to match the reference and position it properly. In edit mode, I can also work on multiple objects at once. If I select them with Shift, I can go in here and modify them simultaneously like this. I'll duplicate this one, rotate it here, place it at the bottom, and align it nicely with the wall. So all of these are tools we've already seen before. Rotate, move, and scale. Alright, now let's add the mirror modifier so we don't have to build everything from scratch. In the Modifiers panel, press Shift-A, find Mirror, and set the axis to the house. And now to do the same with all the other objects, I simply select them with Shift, and lastly select the one that already has the mirror. This is the active object, and the active object is always yellow. The non-active ones are orange. So with this object active, I press Ctrl-L and choose Copy Modifiers. What this does is copy the modifier from this object, and this way we apply the mirror to all the others. Alright, we're almost done. Let's make the small top window. For that, I place the cursor up here, press Shift-A, and create a circle. In the side view and with X-ray, I align it with the wall of the house like this. I make sure it's properly aligned with the surface and then scale it. Go into Edit mode, select Everything, and press E. With E, we extrude. Then I press S to scale it roughly to match the reference. Something like this. I think this is a good size. Maybe just a bit smaller. Now again, with everything selected, I press E to extrude again. It extrudes backward and creates a shape like a tire. If I move it forward, this is what we get. With this extrude tool, we can generate these types of objects. I press W, Shade Auto Smooth, and place it on the surface. I can scale it a bit more and move it slightly downward so it matches the reference better. And that's it. I place the 3D cursor in the center, and the only thing left is the tree. For the tree, we're going to do a very simple process as well. I place the 3D cursor here. We create a circle just to use the extrude tool, although we could also use a cylinder. I scale it, and in front view, I extrude it along the Z-axis. Then I scale it, and this way we get this cylinder. I can scale this a bit, lower it slightly, and press W, Shade Auto Smooth, so everything becomes smooth. Finally, I create some cones to make the leaves of the tree. I press W and Shade Auto Smooth. Then, with Shift-D, I create a few copies, and I make each one slightly smaller. So here it's just about balancing the sizes. The cones at the top will gradually be smaller, and that's it. And well guys, now it's just about making small adjustments. Position, size, and making sure everything looks fluid and visually balanced. And with that, we've finished all our models. That would be the full process for this small project. I think we can move this circle slightly to the right so it's better distributed. To add shadows to our object, I go to this Viewport Shading section and enable Shadow. This makes it look much nicer because it casts shadows and looks more realistic. And if you want to see your model with a completely clean interface, you can press this button and preview how it looks. Here in the back, I have some hard edges. To smooth them, I simply select them and apply Shade Auto Smooth, just like we did with the other objects. And with that, friends, we've finished our first 3D model. It's a pretty simple process if we go step by step, starting from the most basic tools. If you made it this far, you already know much more about Blender than when you started, and that's great progress. If you want to learn in a more structured way with many practical projects, I also have a full beginner Blender course. The link is in the description. And if you want to go a bit further, I'll leave you another tutorial where we'll cover more advanced concepts, new modeling techniques, materials, and lighting. I hope you enjoyed this process, learned a lot, and I'll see you in the next video.